It began with a smirk from Huckabee, the kind of laugh that travels further than words. He leaned into his microphone, dismissing Crockett with the ease of someone who thought the chamber was already on his side. But then she leaned forward, steady, unshaken, and delivered a line so sharp, so final, that the laughter stopped midair. The room froze. The cameras caught every second. Huckabee never saw it coming. Stay with us. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, because this is the clash no one will forget. The room was meant for procedure. Instead, it became a battlefield. The chamber lights glared against polished wood, rows of microphones flickering red as committee members shuffled their notes. The agenda, at least on paper, was straightforward. Testimony on civic responsibility, cultural divisions, and the role of leaders in shaping public trust. Boring business to most, routine business to insiders. Jasmine Crockett, however, sat with her posture angled forward, her eyes locked on the dais. A stack of carefully tabbed folders rested at her side, though her hands stayed flat on the table, steady. She wasn't here to repeat talking points. She was here to draw a line. Across from her sat Mike Huckabee, former governor, conservative firebrand, TV commentator, and today the invited witness. He leaned back in his chair, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips as if the room was already his. His voice had carried weight for years, and his laugh carried even more. The chairman cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and gave Huckabee the floor for his opening remarks. Huckabee wasted no time. "We live in an age," he began, his voice smooth but heavy with condescension, "where some people in this very chamber confuse passion with wisdom, noise with truth. I've lived long enough to know the difference, and I'd caution the younger members here to respect the difference as well." The words hung in the air like a challenge without a name. But every camera knew where it landed. Crockett didn't move. She didn't roll her eyes or shake her head. Instead, she sat motionless, letting the jab linger long enough for everyone to feel it. Reporters scribbled furiously. Photographers adjusted lenses. A senator in the back row raised an eyebrow, whispering to his aide. That was aimed right at her. Huckabee leaned forward, clearly enjoying the silence. He chuckled, his laugh low and deliberate, and tapped his pen against the desk. "See, real leadership isn't about shouting the loudest in hearings. It's about character. It's about values. And forgive me, but I'm not seeing much of either across the aisle." The laugh grew louder, joined by a few murmurs of agreement from his allies. It was the kind of laughter that fills a chamber with imbalance, tilting the room before the real argument even begins. Crockett inhaled once, slow, deliberate. She adjusted the microphone slightly, the sound sharp in the silence, drawing eyes back toward her. The tension in the gallery thickened. The cameras cut to her face, calm, unflinching, the kind of quiet that doesn't read as submission, but as calculation. Huckabee sat back, clearly convinced he'd scored his point. What he didn't realize, what no one realized yet, was that the laughter was about to die in his own throat. The laugh faded, the silence sharpened. Crockett leaned forward, her eyes steady, her voice low but precise. She didn't shout. She didn't match Huckabee's bravado. She simply spoke into the microphone with the kind of tone that forces every ear to tune in. "Governor Huckabee, you say leadership is about values, about character. Let's talk about that, because respect is a value. And laughing at colleagues when they speak, that's not leadership. That's arrogance dressed as humor." The gallery went still. Huckabee blinked, caught off guard by the sharpness of her delivery. His smirk faltered for the first time. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens carving the word arrogance into notepads. Huckabee chuckled again, though it came out thinner now. He leaned closer to his mic. "Congresswoman, I've been in public life long enough to know when someone's out of their depth. Passion without wisdom is just noise. And frankly, I don't think the American people are fooled." Gasps rippled across the chamber. It wasn't subtle anymore. He had doubled down, dismissing not just her argument, but her very legitimacy. Crockett didn't flinch. She flipped open one of her folders, sliding a page into the light. Her voice remained calm, but the words carried steel. "Noise, Governor? This is a transcript from one of your own speeches. 2008, when you said, and I quote, A leader who mocks his opponents is a leader who fears his own weakness. Those are your words, not mine. So I ask, was that wisdom back then or just more noise? The room erupted in murmurs. Reporters lifted their heads, jaws slack. A photographer snapped a rapid burst of shots, catching Huckabee's eyes narrowing, his hand tightening around his pen. He opened his mouth to respond, but the weight of the contradiction was already sinking in. Crockett didn't stop. You mocked me 5 minutes ago. You mocked my colleagues. And yet here, in your own record, you admit that mocking others is the act of weakness. So which Huckabee are we supposed to believe? The one who wrote those words? Or the one who laughs at them today? The silence after her question was brutal. Huckabee's allies shifted in their seats, some avoiding his gaze, others fumbling with their papers as though distraction might erase the moment. The chairman cleared his throat, but even he didn't intervene. The room was transfixed, suspended in the tension Crockett had just created. Huckabee finally leaned back, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Congresswoman, I think you're twisting. Crockett cut in, her voice firmer now. I don't have to twist anything. Your words twisted themselves, and the American people are watching. Gasps again. The gallery stiffened, the silence heavier than before. Huckabee had laughed at her once. He wasn't laughing now. His laugh had mocked her. His own record mocked him. Crockett adjusted her chair slightly, sliding another document from the folder. The paper was crisp, highlighted in neon yellow, deliberate, prepared. She placed it flat on the desk, letting the cameras catch it before she spoke. Governor Huckabee, she began, calm and deliberate. Earlier you claimed leadership is about values, about standing for what's right even when it isn't popular. But let's read your own testimony from 2012, before this very body. She glanced down, voice carrying through the microphone with measured weight. You said, and I quote, "True leaders do not exploit faith for applause. They live it quietly with humility." The chamber stirred. Reporters perked up, pens scrawling faster. A murmur rolled across the gallery. Huckabee's smirk faltered again, his eyes darting toward his aides. Crockett looked up, locking eyes with him. Governor, just last month you stood on a stage in Alabama, waving a Bible and mocking opponents, calling them godless frauds while the crowd laughed. That wasn't humility. That was exploitation. And it wasn't quiet. It was loud, it was cruel, and it was your choice. The silence in the room pressed heavy. Tuberville whispered something under his breath, earning a sharp glare from a nearby Democrat. The camera zoomed tight on Huckabee's face, a mixture of irritation and unease. Huckabee tried to interject, his tone clipped. Congresswoman, I think you are confusing. Crockett cut him off with surgical calm. I'm quoting. Your words, Governor, not mine. And here's the contradiction. You told the American people a leader should walk in humility. Then you strutted on stage, mocking faith like a weapon. So which version of you is true? The humble one or the one who laughs? Gasps echoed from the gallery. A reporter whispered audibly, "That's a dagger." Huckabee leaned forward, gripping his pen, his voice rising. My faith has always been central to my public service. I will never apologize for it. Crockett's reply came swift, sharper than before. No one asked you to apologize for faith. I'm asking you to apologize for hypocrisy. The chamber erupted, murmurs, gasps, pens flying across notepads. Huckabee's face tightened, his jaw clenching. For the first time in the hearing, his laugh was nowhere to be found. The chairman tapped his gavel once, half-hearted, but the silence had already reclaimed the room. Crockett leaned back slightly, sliding the document toward the clerk so it entered the official record. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply let the weight of the contradiction settle on Huckabee's shoulders. The room that once laughed with him now leaned against him. The contradiction still lingered when Huckabee straightened his tie, his voice louder, trying to reclaim the ground slipping beneath him. Congresswoman, let me remind this committee, I've dedicated my life to serving people of faith. I've defended values under attack from your side of the aisle for years. If anyone here thinks I'm a hypocrite, maybe they should look in the mirror. A ripple of discomfort ran through the chamber. The remark landed heavy, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt defensive. Reporters exchanged knowing looks, pen scratching phrases like shift in tone and defensive pivot. Crockett tilted her head, eyes fixed on him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't take the bait. She simply turned another page in her file and spoke slowly, as if guiding the room step by step. Governor, you talk about defending values. Let's test that. Because in 2015, when a bill came up to expand healthcare access for veterans, you went on national television and said it wasn't the government's job to, quote, babysit people who chose service. Those were your words. The silence was instant, suffocating. A veteran seated in the public gallery stiffened, his jaw tightening. Several lawmakers turned their heads sharply toward Huckabee. Huckabee waved a hand, laughing nervously. That quote is taken out of context. I was making a larger point. Crockett leaned forward, her voice like glass cutting through the air. Governor, there is no context where mocking veterans for seeking care is leadership. My father served. Thousands of fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters served, and you laughed about it. The gallery gasped. The veteran in the back nodded slowly, arms crossed, his silence louder than words. Reporters scribbled furiously. A CNN correspondent whispered to his neighbor, "This is bad. Really bad." Another shook her head. She's nailing him to his own words. Huckabee's smirk was gone now, replaced by flushed cheeks and darting eyes. He muttered again, out of context, but his voice lacked conviction. Crockett pressed on, but she didn't shout. She didn't need to. Governor, you said humility is a value. You said mocking opponents is weakness. You said exploiting faith is wrong. And you said veterans shouldn't expect care. That's not leadership. That's a pattern, and this room sees it. The chairman shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that the chamber itself had turned. Allies who once chuckled at Huckabee's jokes now sat stone-faced, unwilling to share in the laugh that no longer landed. A reporter's voice carried from the gallery, whispered but audible, "The laughter's over." One chamber heard it. Millions replayed it. By the time the committee recessed, a shaky phone clip was already racing across Twitter. 34 seconds long. Caption, Huckabee laughs. Crockett silences him with his own words. Within an hour, it crossed 1 million views. TikTok edits multiplied instantly. On one side of the screen, Huckabee chuckling, leaning back smugly. On the other, Crockett reading his 2012 quote and about mocking being weakness. Users layered dramatic soundtracks, pounding drums, slow piano, even courtroom gavel effects. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Crockett versus Huckabee. Hashtag silence in the room. Hashtag values exposed. Instagram Reels framed it differently. Screenshots of Huckabee mid-laugh, then freeze frame on Crockett leaning into the mic with the caption, "Your words, Governor." Not mine comments poured in, legend. This is how you handle hypocrisy. Respect her calm power. Cable news broke in before primetime. MSNBC aired the clip at the top of the hour. Crockett versus Huckabee. Clash over values, CNN's Chiron read. Her line silences the room. Even Fox, cautious but cornered, ran it under the softer banner. Heated exchange in committee hearing. But no matter the spin, the visual was inescapable. Huckabee laughing, Crockett ending it. Late-night shows clipped it into monologues. One host joked, Huckabee brought the laugh track, but Crockett wrote the script. The audience roared, but the punchline didn't soften the reality. Podcasts dropped emergency episodes. One titled it bluntly, "The Line That Ended the Laugh." Talk radio hosts debated fiercely, but even callers who defended Huckabee admitted the optics were brutal. "He walked into that one," a veteran caller muttered. Even in churches and community centers, the moment carried weight. A pastor shared the clip during Bible study, shaking his head. "Humility isn't supposed to look like this," he told his congregation. Inside Huckabee's own circle, aides scrambled. Phones buzzed with alerts. One strategist muttered under his breath, "This isn't just bad. This is sticky. People won't forget it." Meanwhile, Crockett didn't tweet, she didn't post, she didn't amplify the clip herself. She didn't need to. The silence she left in the chamber became the megaphone for millions outside it. The words stopped. The faces kept speaking. When the committee reconvened, the shift was visible before the gavel even struck. What had been a room of smirks and chuckles now sat taut with unease. The same lawmakers who had chuckled under their breath during Huckabee's opening remarks now avoided his gaze altogether. Huckabee returned with a practiced calm, but his shoulders betrayed him. Tight, hunched, his notes clutched too firmly. He tapped out his pen twice, the sound echoing louder than it should have. The man who had opened with laughter now looked like he was searching for an exit. Crockett, by contrast, sat serene. Her hands rested lightly on the table, her files closed. She didn't need another stack of paper. Her silence was her weapon now, and everyone in the chamber felt it. Reporters scribbled less furiously now. Instead, they stared, noting body language. One journalist wrote a single line in bold, "He isn't laughing anymore." Another muttered to a colleague, "This is the image that will define the day." On the dais, a Republican senator who had smirked earlier now leaned back, arms crossed, lips pressed thin. A Democrat who had shuffled papers nervously leaned forward, elbows on the desk, chin in hand, eyes fixed on Huckabee with something closer to disappointment than anger. The gallery of citizens was worse. A veteran in uniform sat stiff, arms crossed, his gaze locked on Huckabee. A young activist shook her head slowly, murmuring to the person next to her. He walked right into it. Huckabee tried to rally. He leaned into the mic, voice louder now, rehearsed lines tumbling out. "I will not be silenced by partisan theatrics. I stand for values, for faith, for the real America." But his words fell flat, no nods, no applause, just cameras clicking, recording the dissonance between his defiance and the emptiness around him. Crockett didn't interrupt. She didn't smirk. She simply raised her eyes once, meeting his, and let the silence speak for her. It was devastating. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't need to say anymore. Even Huckabee's allies admitted it quietly. A hot mic caught one aide whispering, "He lost the room." Another muttered to a colleague. She buried him without raising her voice. The chairman looked at Huckabee, then at Crockett, then down at his gavel. He tapped it lightly, but the chamber didn't move. No one dared fill the silence she had created. The chamber waited for more words. Crockett only needed one. The back and forth had ended. The laughter, the contradictions, the viral storm, all of it brought the chamber to this moment. Huckabee shifted uneasily, his paper stacked, his pen gripped, his face flushed. He was ready for another round, but Crockett wasn't. She leaned forward, pressed the mic button, and spoke with the calm authority of someone who already knew the verdict. "Governor Huckabee, you came here today laughing. But values don't laugh, they live. And if you can't live them, then maybe it's time you stop preaching them." The chamber froze. The sentence cut through the marble walls sharper than any gavel, cleaner than any rebuke. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but it was final. Huckabee opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes dropped to his notes. The pen in his hand tapped once, then stopped. The cameras caught the moment. The silence, the stillness, the absence of a comeback. Reporters scribbled furiously. One underlined the phrase 3 times, "Values don't laugh." Another wrote in the margin, the line that ended it. The chairman raised his gavel, but even the sharp crack couldn't break the silence Crockett had left. Huckabee sat back, eyes downward, his earlier smirk erased completely. The man who had walked into the chamber with laughter left it with nothing at all. Crockett didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She leaned back, folded her hands, and let the silence remain hers. Was Jasmine Crockett right to silence Mike Huckabee with his own words? Or did she go too far? Tell me what you think in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe because the next clash will be even bigger.